everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wrist Cheese Radio Podcast. This is episode 22. I'm one of your hosts, Schmidt, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, Bro Dinky. Bro, what's going on, my friend?
Not a whole lot. Back to work this week. We are recording on St. Patty's Day, so I am enjoying a libation while we are recording here.
As you
I
should.
hope everybody else is too. I had a busy night. Now that I'm back to work, it's all the holidays are big catering events. So
yeah, for sure.
200 people worth tonight. Tons of corned beef and such. But I persevered. I'm here, ready to go.
How about you? Good, man. Things are back to normal. Not only am I back recording an episode, I'm back with full voice. No more skipping weeks of voice and all that stuff. So things have been good. Just been very, very busy. But hey, finding time to record a podcast episode.
We do have a friend with us here tonight who we will introduce in a moment. A good friend of mine who I've known since, I must have probably been maybe even in the hundreds of followers at this point. I don't even know if I broke 1,000 yet. But regardless, I made friends with the gentleman joining us. His name is Akbar. He is the proprietor of Le Sablier Watches. And he and I sort of just hit it off, and I guess we have the same kind of degen sense of humor. So we've been friends ever since, and we've hung out a few times and stuff. And we kind of always talked about him coming on. So Akbar, say hi real quick.
Hey guys, my name's Akbar. As Brodinky mentioned, I'm the proprietor of Le Sablier Watches. You were around 400 followers when I started.
Oh boy,
400.
I was one of the OGs on your page.
That's a day one.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I've always been into watches since I was a kid. As long as I can remember, I was always into watches. And a few years ago, I decided to start my own brand. And aside from collecting and buying watches, I still do that. I don't only wear my own brand's watches, but I like to think of myself more as just your average watch guy who also happens to own a brand.
Sure.
That's cool. That's great. So we're going to get more into that and a lot more about microbrands today.
Yes.
Before we do, I'm sure everybody who knows Schmidt is dying to get his takes on the Omega releases.
No, nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Oh, come on. There are people in our inbox who are like, "Did you see this? Have you seen this? What do you think of this?" So real quick, without making this an entire episode, let's just run down. I'll throw them at you. We'll hit it real quick, right?
Okay.
First of all
right.
Green 300-meter diver.
Fantastic.
I like it. I mean, I think people are really kind of reaching with the whole, this is a Hulk copy. Like,
no, it's
I
had a buddy who was fortunate enough to be at the press event last week for Omega in the US, and he sent me some live photos and everything. So I got as good of a C as you probably can. The greens are completely different. So the Hulk is much more of like like an Irish green or a Kelly green. This is much more what looks like kind of more sophisticated. It's a darker palette. It looks more like an army green or a hunter green. And it just looks good, man. It for me, my choice is on the rubber strap. I know people, love or hate the bracelet. It's fine, but the watch overall looks really, really fantastic. So
yeah, and I mean, look, you can't put a copyright on a color, right? Like, get lost. Yeah.
I mean,
Geo just put out a green diver. Is that a Hulk copy too? I don't think so.
People are always going to draw those parallels. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's like people are going to buy this watch. Why? Because you can't buy a Hulk. You can't buy a Serment. You can't buy anything. So why would I not want to make something that I know will sell well, even despite all of the Rolex fanboys throwing shade? It is what it is, man. You're just salty because you can't buy one yourself. That's it. It's period.
Right. So, okay, rolling on that kind of concept, I'll get into the next one, which I do think is exactly what you just mentioned, which is the Aquaterras in the multiple colors. Look, the hottest watches of the past 2 years have been the Oyster Perpetual line with all the different Skittle colors all over them, right? You can't get them. So if you're going to get one at a store, and keep in mind, and I've said this to a lot of people, is that these brands don't market to watch enthusiasts exclusively. Some of the stuff is for us, right? The ultra deep is for us, right? Because they want to pound their chest and they know who's going to take notice. Something like this is for all the people who said, oh, these oyster perpetuals look really cool, I'm going to go get one. Walk in the store, the guy laughs in their face, and then they say, well, what are those? And they're like, well, that's a similar item in honestly a better sizing, and it's also a master chronometer.
Yeah, man. I mean, I will say this, just a cursory glance from the Aquaterra drops. It's an Aquaterra. I mean, it is what it is. It's been in the staple for Omega's collection since 2002. In case nobody knew about the history of the Aquaterra, it's a water sea watch. It's a sea and land watch, hence the name, right? Aqua water, terra land.
Yep.
It's a watch designed to do both. I will say this: it's really hard to photograph these watches and get true color. Because from what I saw in the photos that were sent to me, the saturation levels are very high. Specifically, the red dial, which they're calling terracotta. It's almost, when you look at it, it's a bright red, like your logo, bro.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you turn it on the side, it's a red orange. So it has this dynamicism of color that you don't see in something like a coral oyster perpetual. Why? Because those are literally just painted dials. Like, the color is the color. It's flat. It's not very sexy. It doesn't have any light play. It is very stale, in my opinion. Is it look good? Sure. But is it inviting to the eye? No. These new Aquaterras, from what I saw, look amazing. The dials look fantastic.
I think the green is better than every single oyster perpetual color. Blue, whatever, you name it. I think it's got all of them beat. This green looks awesome.
Well, and I heard rumored that the Aquaterra green, it's a kind of like a lighter shade of green.
Reminds me of the Grand Seiko green from those limited editions that came out.
Yeah. But I also heard that there was a rumor, and I don't know if this is, this was hearsay, so I'm not going to say this is definitive, but I heard that this is the similar shade to the 5711 green because the dial manufacturers are in fact the same.
Oh, don't tell Greg Powell, please.
That was the rumor. Again, I wasn't there. I was not access to press, so that is 100% a rumor.
But I will give them. I will give them this. That the 38 millimeter size was genius because oyster perpetual 41. Honestly, I dislike the proportion on 41 a lot. 36, I like much better, but it's not for everybody. 38, I think it fits perfect. Anybody could wear it. Nailed it. Right.
And the bracelet is also new too. So
it looks great.
Anybody that had a hang up on the bracelet, because it was a little chunky for sure. Anybody that had a hang up on the bracelet, the new bracelet is phenomenal. My buddy showed me how fluid it was, how sinewy it is. It looks like it's gonna be a home run for a lot of people. So, sit tight. They'll be coming at some point. I'm sure this year. Omega. I can't wait for them to be in stores. But these watches are fantastic. Period. Like they look really good.
Ultra deep. I think that's a pretty obvious shot across the bow at the deep sea. Nothing to see here. I mean, that's just
nothing to see. Nothing to see. Nothing to see here. My heart with diving. This to me was a out of left field launch for Omega, but in the best way. The watch is rated for, what was it? 6,000 meters, 20,000 feet. Okay.
Insanity.
To put things in perspective, the deep sea is rated at 3,990 meters, right? So well under, we're talking like over 2,000 meters less in a watch you can buy in an entirely new alloy, apparently, according to Omega. And it's just a badass looking watch, period. Like there are shots fired for sure. And a lot of the Rolex fanboys are just like, their brains are melting out their ears after this watch came out. But again, you set a threshold, somebody's going to surpass it. What are you going to do next? Yeah. That's the question.
Moving on, I think the constellations will probably go a little overlooked. I like the ceramic one that just came out with the blue. Looks really nice. The ladies models look pretty good. Get some interesting color palettes there.
Yeah.
I think it's an under the radar watch. It'll probably stay under the radar, but cool release. I'm going to go ahead.
I was going to say, it's an under the radar watch here for the States. Yeah. I mean, we know Constellation, when you think about Omega, you're thinking about Seamaster and Speedmaster, period. Like that's just what a lot of people are going to focus on, especially here in the US. Funny enough, everywhere else in the world, Constellation is actually the number one selling line for Omega.
Wow.
And it's funny too. I heard this many years ago, back when I was still selling the brand. If you take Constellation out of Omega's family and you split it up and create its own watch brand, it's like the 5th largest watch company in the world. If you literally take Constellation out of the line for the company and sell it as its own family, or its own line, it's like the 5th largest watch company.
That's interesting.
So that just kind of gives you the idea of like the power of Omega and like what they do. But I'm with you, bro. These new Constellations, especially the gents, the 41 millimeters, it looks like that white ceramic. Again, haven't seen it in person, but the white ceramic looks really good.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna tell you the sleeper of this entire drop, which I don't think anybody's talking about enough, is the 57 Speedmasters. These are awesome. First of all, compared to the older one that they released, which was hand wine, or these are hand wine.
These are hand wine.
The old one's automatic.
Yeah,
and it was chunky as hell. These are almost 4 millimeters slimmer. That's a big deal.
It was a technological change back then. I mean, back when I sold the line, we carried 57, and that was the biggest criticism. Everyone loved the watch from the top down.
Yeah.
But as soon as you rotated your wrist over, you're like, dude, this is just way too thick. That sapphire crystal underneath is just causing a lot of wrist protrusion. Like it was literally lifting the watch up off the wrist. The bracelet was very chunky, but that was just kind of the design technology for that period. These new 57s, they look eminently better. I haven't gotten confirmation on this, but the bracelet looks like it's the kind of flat link style from the Apollo 50th.
Yeah.
The links are super thin. It looks like it articulates much better. This one will have Omega's micro adjustment clasp.
I was going to say, I heard extension clasp.
Yeah. It's not much to keep the clasp pretty small, but it looks like it's going to be included in there. And the colorways, I think the Speedmaster, everyone, when they think of Speedies, they're going to default to Moonwatch. And so you have a very limited kind of color palette that's associated with the Speedmaster collection. So I think introducing a burgundy or a green or a new kind of blue in there will really kind of shake things up. And for people that have been on the fence about getting a Speedmaster, but don't want a Moonwatch, I think this is a home run. It's manual wine, Meta certified, broad arrow. It looks good, and it has a date. So I don't know, man. I think we got a sleeper here for sure.
Yeah, and then the creme de la creme of this drop for me are the 2 gold Speedmasters. I mean, you have a gold panda, which is dope, and then you have this greenish hue situation, which I almost laughed. I saw some people compare this to the quote unquote John Mayer Daytona.
Yeah.
I was like, that's not even close.
Yeah.
Because it's gold and it has a tinge of green.
Yeah, for sure. And again, there's gonna be fanboys out there that are, they're on that hype train. It's like, oh, it looks like Rolex, we're copying everything. You can't get it, so we're just gonna make the same watches. It's fine if you want to believe that. Greens are completely different. So the John Mayer green is like green. It's a very vibrant green. From what I saw, the photos on the Moonshine Speedmaster with the green dial, it's a very dark green. It's almost like a grayish. It's almost like a gray green or black green, if that's even a color. So it has a nice kind of like subtlety about it. It's not green until like you see it like right in the sun, according to my buddy. So that's kind of cool. My favorite, honestly, though, of all of them is the golden panda on the rubber strap.
Sick.
It's a very cool watch. And the biggest thing, too, that I find that's very interesting is, again, you have a similar Daytona style to this on rubber, on the Oyster Flex. The Daytonas don't have solid gold dials. Did you know that?
Did not.
Yeah. The Daytona does not have a solid gold dial. It is a gold PVD treatment, according to my buddy, because he said that Omega kind of pointed this out, that this particular model is a solid 18 karat gold dial. So it has additional, like, I think he said 7 or 8 grams more gold than the standard green dial version. So there is a cost association difference there. But he said that when you see the gold aisle in person, it is like phenomenal, and it's got more weight. It's weightier. So when you feel them side by side, it has a presence. So, very cool. That would have to be my pick for sure. I love the rubber strap. He sent me a photo. It's got like a moon texture underneath it.
Interesting.
Which is really cool. And apparently it will be compatible with the current collections of Speedmasters. So for all you speedy heads out there that have been looking for a rubber strap for your moon watch, the new 3861 Speedmaster, this version with the rubber strap will fit your steel case as well.
All
you
right.
heard it here first.
So that out of the way, I think everybody's satisfied now. We can finally talk our topic. Our topic is going to be a little something about microbrands. We're not going to get too much into the realm of all of the different brands and like ranking things and such.
Yeah.
But I know from so many people that I've associated with, even personal friends of mine, like IRL, not Instagram, have attempted at starting a microbrand.
Yeah.
And I think there's a little more to it than people believe.
Yeah, for sure.
It's definitely not easy. Like I was right there with him, kind of checking out everything, going through the motions, looking at different mock-ups and things. It's like a second job.
Oh, in some cases it is the job, right? Like it's crazy.
Yeah, if you get big enough.
Yeah, for sure. If we do it right, it becomes the full-time job. Absolutely.
Right. So we have our, I guess, firsthand experience with us tonight, and he already gave a brief introduction of who he is. But Akbar, let me ask you off the bat here: what drove you to want to start a microbrand watch in the first place, aside from being a watch person?
Well, I'll be honest. At the time, when I started Le Sablier, I actually didn't know that much about microbrands, and I was actually, I've always been a creative person. I like building things.
Okay.
And there was a lot of times where, in my mind, I pictured like, what a watch I would want to buy would look like. And I pictured something below $1,000. We could all buy Rolexes and Omegas. Again, side topic, I absolutely love the Omega releases, just to add on to you guys, especially the Gold Speedmaster, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. Any case, I started drawing watches. Honestly, that's where it started out. I was in college. I was in my dorm room, and I would just draw. I would draw. I would open up 3D modeling software. My background's in computer science, software engineering specifically. And on the side, I had a little bit of experience with 3D modeling and digital arts too. So I would pull up Photoshop one day, and I would be like, "Damn, wouldn't it be cool if a watch had this and this and this and this?" And then before I knew it, I just started drawing random watches, and then I started out by buying Frankenstein parts, as I like to call them. I'd buy the case of one watch, I'd buy a Myota movement, I'd buy a dial, and I'd buy a random set of hands, and I'd just toss them together on my college, coffee table I had in my dorm. And it's sort of that was sort of where it absolutely, like, this is many years ago now, but we weren't even a brand there. I was just a guy who was experimenting.
Yeah. You were prototyping before prototyping, really.
Exactly. Yeah. I was just a guy with, $50, $100 to mess around with. And, I just bought random watch parts. Esslinger.com, they have hands, they have everything, crowns. I didn't have a company. I didn't have anything. I was just a dude printing out paper pieces. I would tape them onto dials, and I would put together I would just put together watches on my coffee table, and I broke a whole lot of movements doing that. I broke a whole lot of hands, whole lot of crowns.
Nobody knows about that part. It's like we talk about so much about prototyping and the development. It's like, it's like I also messed up a lot of stuff too.
I don't want to know.
There's a hard learning curve.
I don't want to know how many parts were in that carpet.
Man, the amount of string bars. The big thing is crown stem.
Oh yeah.
Right? When you're prototyping it, because no crown stem comes exactly the size of the
They're
case.
Super long.
Yeah, so I'd just be walking back from my kitchen, and I'd feel a sharp stabbing pain in my foot. And great, I'm going to get impaled by an internal crown stem from a Myota 8215. Like,
yeah.
My college apartment and my college dorm were a very interesting place to be.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost kind of like the skunk works of prototyping. It's just like get a bunch of random stuff together. Here's a finite amount of money, and let's just see what we can throw at the wall and see what sticks. And that's kind of what the best creative development really comes from. Is just reckless abandon, running full steam ahead, not let anything stop you or drag you down, and really trying to come up with something that's unique and special.
Exactly. And that was the big thing. Like from there, I moved on to doing some 3D printing. And, I didn't have a 3D printer. I didn't have like any of the tools to do this. But, my college that I went to, they had a 3D printer. And there's multiple websites that'll let you 3D print something. So I would just order cases and movements and hands and try to put them all together. And that's sort of where it started. I 3D printed a watch, and somebody was like, dude, that's pretty cool. Like, you
Yeah.
should sell those. And the first thought that went through my mind is like, I love watches. I've collected, bought, sold, everything. I've been an absolute watch idiot savant, but I'm not a watchmaker. I didn't go to Swiss watchmaking school.
Right,
I
right.
wish I had. That would have been a dream of mine, but I was in school for computer science, and I was like, I didn't know if I could sell a watch that I made with my two hands at that point and
Sure.
be able to charge money for it. So that's when I started looking into. I'm like, maybe I can actually make a brand, and that's sort of where the whole germination for Le Sablier came from.
That's
I love
actually a
it.
cool story. Like I like
I
that so
love it.
much better than like the I once knew a person in my family tree that I didn't really know who was into diving, and so I made a micro diver, which is exactly what everybody else did. Like
Yeah, and the other thing too, it's like it's an honest take. It's a
yeah,
it's a nitty gritty take. It's like sometimes what
Right.
we do is not always the most glamorous.
Yeah.
Sometimes how we do things isn't the most romantic, but it gets the job done because our dedication and our passion really comes through, and that's something that's cool. For me, I know exactly what that was like. I mean, I was in college at the same time messing with watches, and back then I was apprenticing to do watchmaking school, which never panned out. But I was working on people's stuff, and same type of thing. You open up your college dorm and you got crystals and hands and just like random stuff everywhere, and it's kind of like this mad scientist experiment in the best way possible. So
Right.
I love it, man. That story is right up with me in my heart, because that's we had very similar experiences. Although I didn't set out to make my own watch brand, so that's where you
Hey,
take the charge.
it was a big it took a lot to build up the courage to do that. I was
Sure.
not, it took many years where I was like, I honestly, I had no idea how to get into this when I started. I had no experience. I was just a guy who liked watches, and I was just a guy with Photoshop CC installed on his computer and the cheapest off-brand 3D modeling software you could think of. Like I was just a dude who loved watches, and at one point I was just like, you know what? If people like what I'm making and I like what I'm making, I might as well do something with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's sort of where it started.
I love it.
it's a very Zuckerberg and friends trying to meet chicks on the internet type of story that snowballed into something else, and now it's Facebook, right?
That's fun. I mean, that's honestly a great way to put it.
It's true, and like I'm gonna share with you guys like the positives and the negatives. Like everybody has their story. There's many micro brands out there that just started and just made it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I'm not one of those, and I'll be honest about that. Like I'm willing to share exactly what I went through to start it, good and bad. And it didn't happen on the first try for me. Like I had to, keep working at it.
So what exactly goes into starting a microbrand? Speaking of which, because although I was privy to a lot of that, I
Mhm.
didn't see the A to Z completely.
yeah,
So the real thing, at a very basic level, you need an idea and you need somebody to execute that idea. So the idea is the easy part. If you're creative and if you're into watches, I'm sure Brodinky and Schmidt, you guys have all sorts of ideas for what watches you want to make. And the thing that a lot of people don't know is you don't even need a design to start. I'm not like that. I like to design things. So I came up with the design and everything before. But truly, if you want to start a brand, the only thing you really need to start out with is a manufacturer.
Okay.
okay,
And you got to look online. And I'm also here today to dispel the notions against China everyone assumes Chinese made is there's always a negative connotation in terms of Chinese made.
Yeah.
But if you see some of the stuff that comes out of China, I'm not allowed to share specifics, but let's just say my bracelet manufacturer makes bracelets for Swiss brands. And I'm not talking about Swiss
for sure.
brands, Swiss brands.
Not Swiss movement.
Proper Swiss brands, and like they know what they're doing in China. Obviously, you can hire somebody to make you an 80-cent watch in China, but you can also hire somebody to make you a $1,500 per unit watch in China too. There's levels to it, So I looked at China to begin with because I was going to start a micro brand, and in my mind, I knew a lot about China. I grew up overseas. A lot of people in the country I grew up in, they do international business, and a lot of them use China for their businesses. And I already knew that, this sort of negative connotation against China is not really based off reality. It's sort of just based off, the notion of protecting American businesses, which is great. I'm all for that. But my point is people don't give China the credit that that's due. Like some of their watchmakers are incredible. There are watch manufacturers, movement manufacturers there that make double tourbillon watches. They make monopusher chronographs. They're everything. Whatever you do in Switzerland, you can do it in China.
For sure.
It doesn't have the glitz and glam of saying Swiss made on it, but you get what you pay for. So I looked specifically to start with in China. And the other thing is this is a thing that not a lot of people talk about. But when you find a manufacturer in China, one of the first things they ask you is, do you want this to be a Swiss-made watch or do you want this to be a China-made watch?
That's actually hilarious.
Because I got that question.
Really?
But our first ever release, they asked us, and literally it was the same case, the same hand, same dial, same everything. It was just they had a factory in China in Switzerland too that would assemble the watch in Switzerland. Yeah. And our first ever watch, the Aviateur VQ, AVQ for short, had a Swiss movement in it. So they were like, this is eligible that we can stamp Swiss made on it. But they were going to basically make everything in China, ship it to Switzerland and assemble it
for final assembly. It's
a 60% rule. They have to have 60% country of origin. So in my mind, I was like, why would I? And I got the quotes for both. I'm not going to lie. I was curious. I was like, it's a Swiss made watch. Let's see what it costs. And it was exactly double what the Chinese watch cost. And I was like, do I want to sell this at double, or do I want to make a better product and not have to pay just for the name for it to be Swiss made?
Because at that point, it's literally just it's just hype.
Words.
I mean, it's just words.
Right.
It's a legal determination, and that's kind of interesting. That is something that I don't think a lot of people understand. I certainly have never heard that before. But it makes a lot of sense. That's very interesting.
Yeah, a lot of Chinese manufacturers you talk to, they'll just be like, do you want us to stamp Swiss made on the dial? If so, we have to do this, this, and this, and we'll make it in our Switzerland facility. And it's the same metal, it's the same case, it's the same hands, it's everything. They'll just ship it to Switzerland and put it together. Requirement for that is, of course, you need a Swiss movement. That's the caveat on that. I can't make a Miyota powered watch and stamp it Swiss made.
Yeah.
But in that, our first ever project had a Swiss quartz movement in it. So that was offered to us as an option. And I said, hell no. I said, I'd rather just make something cheaper, not in terms of quality, but in terms of what I'm selling.
Cost, it's end consumer cost. That's less expensive.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised. I go to I'm often at watch shows. I present at District Time often, which is the DC area based for Microbrand show. LA Microlux is another one that me and Le Sablier are at often. It's based on the West Coast, and people always ask, where's this made? And the people who get microbrands, I say China, they're like, oh, okay, cool. But you occasionally have some people who are like, China, they hear China, they're like, okay, Akbar, thanks for your time, I'm going to the next booth.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, man, if you guys knew, like if you guys really knew what the
this is the thing too that's kind of the ugly inside information, and maybe you can shed more light on this, but there's a lot of brands over the last couple of years that have been affected with supply chain issues, specifically as the pandemic has hit. And
absolutely,
they're not exactly saying as to why they've been affected with supply chain issues, but it's because a lot of their parts aren't actually made in Switzerland. And we're talking big brands like
Right.
very notable brands. And I've heard this talked about and kind of rumored through. And it's like, okay, well, so-and-so's having trouble getting their bezels because they're made in Hong Kong. And
Right.
I mean, like
when did you last hear about a COVID uprising in like Switzerland? Right.
yeah,
Like,
exactly. So it's kind of like, okay, well, so it's okay to get their cases or their bracelets because of XYZ reasons. And it's always COVID.
yeah.
But then you're just like, oh, it's Chinese COVID. It's like,
right.
oh,
Yeah.
it's all the factories overseas that are making these components that they can't get because of their local restrictions and their ability to work and all that stuff. So it's slowing everything down from that point, which is super interesting. And it's kind of crazy that even still today, major Swiss brands are being affected by this in a way that nobody's really talking about.
Right. And like, I don't mean to stir the pot too much, but like I mentioned earlier, there's no COVID in La Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland. There's no there. I mean, there was COVID, but you get what I mean. It didn't disrupt the supply chain in Switzerland the same way. And then again, like, if you talk to other microbrand owners, they'll tell you the same thing. Like, we see case backs often, bracelets often with real Swiss brands logos on them, and they're offered to us. Like, I had a project that I never released. I was working on a dive watch at one point. And I asked them, can you give me a selection of different clasps? Because, I'll be honest with you, as a personal watch collector, I like dive watches, but I'm not your typical, they're not everything for me. I like all sorts of watches. So, I sort of asked them, I said, look, show me a couple options you have. And they just sent me a photo of a box with a bunch of clasps in it. And some of them had some real brands that are from Switzerland that you all see people pay thousands of dollars for. And
we won't name names, but they're certainly
names,
Yeah.
I should have asked my manufacturer. I was like, do you make these buckles or are these like fake buckles for those brands? And she said, no, like these are the buckles that we make. We don't do any like fake watches. And there were some brands you'd see them in ADs, you see them in like in big stores.
Kind of crazy.
They were literally asking me, do you want their buckle? And I was like, you know what?
And that's kind of crazy too, because they could offer it to you. So like what's
Right.
weird though is is there not, I mean, I guess because that brand technically doesn't make it, they don't have the intellectual property behind it.
Right.
Which is crazy.
That's the other part about microbrands a lot of people don't talk about is I mentioned earlier, all you really need is a design. The truth is you actually don't even need a design. Most of the microbrand companies, the manufacturers of these watches, I mean, they have their in-house design team. You can call them up and you can be like, I want a dive watch, 40 millimeters, blue dial. It needs to have a 316L stainless steel case and a Miota 8. Give me 5 options, and they'll make you 5 options. Like, there's some microbrands that they're not really microbrands. I would say more fashion watches. They don't even design their own watches. They'll tell you like, we have these 12 dials, we have these 36 hand combinations, we have these 15 case combinations. That's called OEM manufacturing, original equipment manufacturing, where they let you pick out of a catalog of parts, and they're like, which one of these do you want? So some microbrands do that,
you could tell.
Where
you can tell. It's like going to Subway and picking out your sandwich. It's like
exactly
little lettuce, little
That's
cheese,
good. I like that.
Tomato.
That's an excellent analogy. That's what it's like. So for us, we don't do that.
For sure.
We tool everything we make. And that's that's a considerable expense where we have to be like, we want our own case, we want our own hands, we want our own dial. And you have to pay up front for that. They make
for sure. So percentage wise, when you're starting with this, obviously you're gonna have to have some sizable capital to go into this. But like, as far as like getting things like that, like you said, tooled, what kind of percentages are you talking about in terms of deposits? Or I don't need actual numbers, but just like, is it like a 10% deposit, 20% deposit? Like, what are you on the hook for as an owner?
Well, it all depends on what you're making.
Okay.
Brodinky actually owns one of our watches.
I do.
He has our Sport Classic, which he'll be able to back me up on this. It's not your usual case shape of a watch. It's got a lot going on it, and we have to tool for the Sport Classic line specifically. I tooled everything. I tooled the hands,
Okay.
I tooled the dial, I tooled the bezel. There was not a single thing on that watch that we don't have the tooling for, except for the movement.
Yeah.
I had to use a Miyota movement. Nobody has in-house movements in this price range. And
Sure.
I would say it was expensive. It was over 10%
Yeah.
to tool, just for tooling. And that's not like, most
And that's to fit the movement, right? That's what you're saying, to be able to accommodate that movement.
Right. So they build it,
Okay.
you build it around the movement. That's
Yeah,
one
yeah.
thing as a micro brand too, unless you're a really, really high end brand. And by high end, I'm talking $10,000, $15,000 watches. You can't pick the layout of your movement. You're given a choice of maybe 30 movements, and you have to pick which one fits your wants and needs, which one fits your design needs. So even as a designer, like when I design a watch, the first thing I post onto Illustrator or Photoshop is a movement.
Yeah,
And
makes
I'll
sense.
scale it up to real size, and I'll build the watch around that.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the luxury of doing an in-house movement. I'd love to do it one day, but I have to base off what ETA makes, what Fleta makes, what Miyota makes. So everything other than that, especially on our sport classic lineup, I paid for the tooling for it. And the thing is, when most micro brands go through Kickstarter, and I have a lot of thoughts about Kickstarter. I can touch on that later. But all that stuff, when you pay for an inventory of a watch, it's due later on. The thing that's due immediately is the tooling.
Yeah.
So you have to pay,
because
that
you
up
can't
front.
produce anything until you have like the tools to make it.
Yeah.
Now,
Exactly.
like
even the prototypes,
Yeah.
you have to pay. For us, it was, I want to say, over 10% of the entire inventory cost was just tooling. And Brodinky will back me up. You could see why that's the case on our cases.
Yeah.
There's nothing normal about Le Sablier's watches. We don't have, it doesn't look like a regular watch. So if you're making a more simple watch, you can get away with some things. Like you can use
for
a
sure.
standard case back, for example. That's something I think it doesn't take too much away from the watch. You can use maybe a set of hands that's been used before. But when we made our watch, I tooled everything for that thing, and I had to pay out of pocket for that way before the Kickstarter, way before crowdfunding anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you got to have capital to start getting these designs really done and off the ground. So
Exactly.
there's an initial investment out there for sure. And I think that's kind of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of how the process goes, right? You throw some skin in the game, you decide you wanted to build a watch. Then from there, you create some type of rendering or photo depiction of it based on the manufacturer. And then you take that to Kickstarter or some type of crowdfunding campaign to get it in terms of final production, right? Is that kind of how it goes?
So this is the exact process, at least for us, from start to finish. I will draw something on paper, then I will draw it on Photoshop. And I will write up a technical document. I'll say this watch needs to have so-and-so water resistance, this watch needs to have so-and-so movement in it. This case needs to be hardened, coated. We need a sapphire crystal. We need this sort of dial. I'll basically write a set of requirements and I'll give a design. And my design will be, it won't be a technical drawing. It'll be a drawing of what I want the watch to look like, front, side, and back. I'll send it to them. I'll send it to the manufacturer, and a few weeks later, they'll reply back and say, listen, we've had to tweak your design a slight bit because we can't machine at this angle, or your movement's too thick for us to make the watch this thin. So they give basically an updated design back to you. And they're like, this is your design with the changes that we had to make to it to make it buildable on our side. And then I have to decide whether I'm like, okay, that doesn't work for me, do this. So then I sit on that design and I submit them back my changes for it. And then we finally agree on, we agree, we come to a middle ground. Usually I push back a lot. I will be very honest. My manufacturers hate me. Like I do a lot of I do a lot of stuff where they're just like, do we really need to do this? And I'm like, you absolutely need to do this. One example is all Le Sablier watches have a serial number stamped on the dial. Like we got Brodinky a special number to commemorate his a life achievement of his. And it's something important to me because in the spirit of Le Sablier, I want to make my watches feel unique. You could go to Macy's and you can buy any name brand watch there for the same price, but it's not a unique watch. It's a stamped out product.
For sure.
So I like to give the independent sort of feel. And my manufacturer was like, "You want to stamp the serial number on the dial? Like, we don't do that." And I was like, "Now you do." I was like, "Yeah, you do this."
And here's the thing. Here's the thing now. For all other manufacturers, it'll be an option going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, you have to negotiate on them. Like,
Yeah,
first
absolutely.
time they said we need to make a stamp for each individual number. And I make 100 watches. So, 25, 26, 27, they need a stamp for each of those. And
Yeah.
and they told me this ridiculous price. And I was like, "You can do it cheaper. I believe in you."
You have a 2 and a 7, you can put them together.
Exactly. And they're like, no, it's not possible. Then a week later, they're like, "Actually, we can do it cheaper." And I'm like, that's exactly what I thought. So a part of it is, when you're starting a
Negotiating.
microbrand, don't take anything at face value. Fight with them.
Yeah.
You have to. I think a big part of it is you have to like fight for what you want to make.
They work for you, right?
Exactly. And you'll be told a lot of the times what you want is impossible. And really, that's them trying to lower costs a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it actually is impossible. I'm not going to lie. I was working on a forged carbon watch with a really complex case. And they were like, "Akbar, we can make this. It's going to break. Like, you're going to put this watch on your wrist. It's going to snap." And at that point, I was like, "You know what? I don't want to make a disposable watch." So,
Yeah, for sure. There's still a quality element that your brand and name has to be associated with. So
exactly. So my point is, listen to them with a grain of salt.
Yeah. So getting back.
Sorry.
Go ahead, bro.
No, I was going to say, you alluded to the classic sport. Sport classic a few times now. Would you say that's your signature release of sorts?
I would say, yeah. It's the current model that we've made all of them, and we have them available for sale right now. And I really think that's what defines what I like to make, and that's what defines Le Sablier as a brand. I'll be very honest with you guys. My first release was a watch called the AVQ that I mentioned to you guys, and that was sort of me dipping my toes into the microbrand world. I'm an airplane guy. I love cars and airplanes and anything that moves, really. And I'm actually a pilot in training as well.
Wow,
so
nice.
I wanted to make a 24-hour only watch. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys like 24-hour only watches. I like them. But the truth is, most people look at them and they're like, "How the hell do I read this thing?" Especially here in the U.S. Not a lot of people in America grew up on 24-hour time.
Yep.
Right.
So I'll be straightforward with you guys. It wasn't a huge seller. And at that point, I didn't know how to run a microbrand. I didn't have any marketing in place. I didn't have any reviews. I didn't have any sort of thing done. So, I just showed up on Kickstarter one day and I was just like, "Here's my watches." And it didn't do that great. So after that, I decided I wanted to make something that, really resonated with me and really resonated with what I'm about. And that's where the Sport Classic came from, which is what Brodinki's got.
Yep.
And I'm wearing one right now, but
yeah.
I sort of think that's going to be the basis of all our future models, because that's what we've come to become known for, the Sport Classic.
And you haven't rested on your laurels much here. I mean, you've got how many different editions with aventurine dials? And
yeah. So another thing with me is I really like independent watchmaking. Like, people ask me what my favorite brand is, and random people will ask me, and I'll be like, "Oh, I like Kari Voutilainen." They're like, "What the hell is Kari Voutilainen?"
Yeah.
I love independent watchmaking and I love what goes into it. So I like to do crazy things. One example, like Bro mentioned, is my aventurine dials. If you're not familiar with aventurine, for people who are listening, it's a cobalt and glass mixture with metal shavings in it. And it gives the effect, when you look at the dial, it looks like the night sky. A couple good examples is Omega has Moonface Speedmaster with it. Along and Sonia make it. I think the Patek Philippe Celestial is another example, although it's a $300,000 watch. But another example, we also do an oven baked enamel dial on one watch. And my idea is, like, you go to buy a watch for $500, right? You never see this.
No.
Like you very rarely see stuff like that. And as a watch guy, I like stuff like that. I like the things where I look at it, I'm like, somebody put effort into making this, not just designing it, but it's a show of craftsmanship. It's a show of effort that somebody put into it. Our enamel dial, for example, is just a white dial. If you don't know what enamel dial is, you look at it and you'll be like, "Oh, it's just a white dial." But that's what I like about it. If you know what goes into making an enamel dial, you would be able to appreciate it. But it doesn't scream and shout, look at me. It doesn't scream and shout anything. It's just about the watchmaking then.
Yeah, for sure. And it's traditional watchmaking, right? Like
Exactly.
Petit Fou and Grand Fou, like enamel processes are they're old school, and
Right.
nobody has to do them. You could use a traditional PVD or CVD or whatever type of technology, brass dial, and it's going to be just fine. It's going to look nice and pretty. But to do things the old-fashioned way, there's an artisanal element there that I think a lot of people miss, especially when you're messing with enamels and aventurine. I mean, aventurine is one of my favorite dial materials.
Yes.
Like, period.
Same here.
It is fantastic. None of them will ever be the same. They're unique. They sparkle in the night. It is an incredibly dynamic dial. So it's really cool to see that your Sport Classic is featuring that, which I already knew since I had to do all the research for this. But you're also getting ready to launch a new model, right? And we have the Chrono Sport coming.
Yeah, so we're gonna launch the Chrono Sport on Kickstarter in May. And actually, you mentioned aventurine. I don't have the prototype for this yet because of complications in sourcing, but I'm making a version of the Chrono Sport with an aventurine and meteorite both on the dial. And
so is it gonna be like meteorite subdials or like a kind of like a panda effect?
Exactly. It's a reverse panda sort of with the aventurine's the back plate of the dial, and the two subdials are silver white meteorite. So the idea is it's like two planets in space is what it looks like when you look at the dial. And it's going to be one of the first ever watches to have both meteorite and aventurine on the dial. And I'm starting it at $310. Like, I like to be aggressive with my pricing because, what else are you going to buy for $310, right?
Yeah,
like,
not even a Seiko anymore.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm going to be very honest with you guys again. I have a day job, like this isn't for me to make money. This is for me to express what I like to do. This is for me to make stuff.
It's a creative outlet.
I have not taken a single dollar out of Le Sablier since it started, not even $1 US. I do this because I love doing it. And obviously one day I'd like it to be my full-time job. But, I just do this because it makes me happy. Quite honestly, is it a pain in the ass? Absolutely. But it does make me happy.
It's that passion project people talk about.
Yeah. Exactly. I just saw a quick photo on your website of the aventurine meteorite, and it looks awesome.
Yeah, it was like hard to beat for the price point, no?
I mean, for $310 US, I mean that's insane. And again, it's a Mecha Quartz, right? The Chrono, if I'm not mistaken.
Yup, it's the Seiko VK64A Mecha Quartz movement.
Yeah, it's a good movement.
Which is a beast of a Mecha Quartz movement. I love that movement. You have the smooth sweeping hand, and it's a quartz. You don't ever have to worry about anything. A lot of people hate on quartz. I'm not a part of those people. I think benefits just as even in the high end. You have FP Journes that are quartz, and they're great watches. There's a space for quartz everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we had an episode fully dedicated to kind of dispelling the rumors and everything about quartz. It's just like, is it mechanical? No. Is it more accurate? Yes. Is there a place for it in watch collecting? Absolutely. It just kind of depends on which pieces and what you want to collect, but 100% in the quartz camp too, for sure.
Exactly. I'm a big fan. And one thing I do with quartz as well is I always remove the running seconds hand out of a quartz watch.
I like that a lot.
I personally, when I buy a watch, I hate the clicks. Like, I'll forget it if it's a mechanical watch with a deadbeat seconds because that's a complication.
Yeah.
But on a quartz watch, it's just like
it's a reminder that it's quartz.
Exactly. So and I don't think you really need it. The VK64A does not have a running second. That's one of the reasons I picked it. I got a lot of hate for it, but it's what I wanted to make at the end of the day.
No, I mean I think the bicompax layout is clean. I think that choice is great, especially for someone like me, because that is a big pet peeve of mine, and one of the reasons why I don't buy a lot of quartz chronographs is just because for me, a lot of them still feature the ticking second or running second, and I don't need it. I already know it's quartz. Like I bought it, so You know,
Right.
and the thing is too, with that ticking second hand, it's irrelevant for time measurement. It's literally just
Absolutely.
to tell you that the watch is still running, because the
Yeah.
time measurement really comes down to the chronograph hand and then the hour recorder, or whatever minute recorder that you have enabled for that function. So it's really irrelevant. So if there are any other micro brands out there listening, please God, get rid of the running second hand in quartz.
Yeah,
It's
the
just,
Yame I just picked up
it's
had
not,
same movement, but that's what I like
Yeah.
about it. No running seconds.
yeah, no running seconds. It doesn't need it. I'm willing to pay less money for something like that in terms of like cost, quartz versus mechanical, but if it's done right. And that, to
Mhm.
me, it's a subtle change, but for me as a collector, makes all the difference in the world, for sure. All right, so hey, let's look at this a little bit more. So we
Mhm.
got signature release.
Well, I think
Are,
we're going to talk details, right? This is a very
yeah,
detail-oriented bunch that we're talking about as far as
Oh yeah.
market is concerned, right? How tough is quality control? I would say both from the manufacturer, because that's one, and then also just having to deal with, let's face it, watch collectors are finicky people. They
Absolutely.
obsess over the smallest details, and sometimes it's warranted. Look, the
yeah.
Seiko chapter rings are not good. I love
Yep.
Seiko. It is what it is. But how hard is it dealing with just from the whole gamut there of quality assurance or whatever you might call it?
It's tough. I mean, especially in the microbrand scene. When you're selling a Seiko, there's a lot of people who buy Seikos that aren't exactly watch people, or they
Sure.
just want a nice, reliable watch. But when you're selling a microbrand, specifically one that looks like mine, a Le Sablier, for example, we have a very distinctive look. So people
Mhm.
want something very specific. And those are the most detail-oriented people. And I'm a pretty detail-oriented person myself.
Sure.
So if somebody complains about something and they're like, this isn't aligned, the business part of me wants to be like, oh, it's within our quality standards. But I'll look at it, I'll be like, damn, they're right. Like,
Yeah.
I'll look at it and I'll just be like, I can't. So I've taken returns before, for many things other people wouldn't take returns for. I've taken them because I just, at the end of the day, like if I'm selling a $500 watch that is such a small batch watch, we usually our runs are between 50 and 100 watches usually. We don't make more than that per version. I have to be able to stand by each and every watch, because
Yeah.
Yeah.
I look at them all before they leave. Our factory does their own quality control, of course, but we're a small operation. I ship out of like, my partner Mohammed. He's not here today, but I literally ship like, we store the watches in his house. I ship out of his house. This isn't some big brand where I have an Amazon
Yeah, there's not
size
a
fulfillment
distribution
warehouse.
center and all that stuff. It's like,
Fulfillment.
this is
Yeah,
you. This is you taking them to the USPS and putting them in the mail.
exactly. I still
Yeah.
remember my first ever shipment of the Sport Classics. I loaded them up in my 2-seater car. My trunk was full and my passenger seat was full, and I drove over to USPS and I dropped them off. But my point with that is I look at every watch before it leaves, or
Yeah.
Mohammed looks at every watch before it leaves. So we do like a final quality control before they leave out. And it's picky because there's a lot of times we'll send stuff back to our manufacturer. They're like, well, it's within our quality control, and I'll be like, it's not within my quality
Yeah.
control.
Yeah.
But then they're like, you know what? Like we made the watches, not you. So there's times where I'll have to take a haircut on it. I'll have to take a hit, and I'm okay with that. At the end of the day, like I want to make a good watch. If
Yeah.
I'm going to lose some money, if I'm going to have to give somebody a replacement watch, if I'm going to have to, refund somebody for it, I'd rather that the person is happy than, people have an image of me as being, oh, like, they don't stand by their watches. Because I do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean,
That's
there's an integrity aspect there, and it's something that you get, I think, with a very intimate relationship with a young brand, right? You
right.
guys, you have to, because if not, you don't have clients to buy your products or to consume your stuff. And I think that as brands get continually bigger, that's something that gets lost in the kind of corporate machine aspect of the
And
business of it.
I think that's one of the big things about starting a micro brand. The main thing you need is to be passionate and empathetic because
Yeah.
every time I deal with a customer, there are times where I can admit I've done it right, and there are times I can admit I've done it wrong. But the way that I think about it every time is like I talk to myself. I'm like, Akbar, you're a watch guy. If you were buying this watch, what would you consider a good interaction to be? You know, if because I own other microbrand watches, you know, I've dealt with other microbrands before. I own watches for big brands, small brands, everything, and I try to think about what a pleasant experience was for me, and I try to emulate that.
Sure.
And you know, if you're a big company that sells millions of watches, you know, honestly, one sale doesn't matter to you, but for me, it does. You know, I only make like less than 1,000 watches a year, less than 500 in most cases. So every watch I sell, it means something.
It matters. Yeah.
Yeah. So I try hard to keep every person happy.
Do you have a specific favorite, whether it be a brand or a specific microbrand watch that is not your own?
Yeah, actually, I have a couple that I like a lot. One of my favorites currently is a brand called DiRenzo. You all might know them. They have a whole lineup of watches. I think they knocked them all out of the park. You know, I believe the owner's name is Sergio. He's a great designer. Love his work. A few others I like. I like Haim watches. If you've met them, they're great guy who runs it. Zakir, amazing guy. You know, and I like Visitor as well. If you know Phil Rodenbeck, the owner of Visitor, I like things that are different. You know, I think
I can tell
so many watches
yeah.
that look the same. You know, I'm not gonna throw shade, but you know, there was a certain Kickstarter release about a year ago that racked a 7-figure amount, and it was a good looking watch, but there wasn't anything different about it. You know, there wasn't anything original. So I love creators that like to make something that has their DNA in it, something that's original, something that's them. You know, so that's why all the ones I mentioned, DiRenzo, Visitor, Haim, like you can see a bit of the person who made it in the watch.
Right.
You know,
right.
That's one thing that's important to me.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, watch collecting is about celebrating your uniqueness as a person and all the things that you make and or that you like. And for sure, each one of these brands certainly is indicative of that. It's a personal taste, but it's good to see that people have the creative energy to put it out there for sure.
Right. You know, a bit with the Sport Classic, actually, you know, a bit of the inspiration of that watch was what you guys were talking about earlier. You guys were talking a lot about the Omega Constellation. And I love the Constellation. I'm a big fan of the Omega Constellation. I think, you know, it's not just me growing up in Asia, but, you know, that's a great underrated watch. And
for sure.
What sort of like brought about the inspiration for the Sport Classic is watches of that era, the 70s. You know, today you only have two designs that really survive from the 70s, if you think about it, the Nautilus and the Royal Oak. Both great watches, but what I used to, back when I was in college and putting all these Frankenstein parts together, I collected 70s watches. Specifically, a 70s Omega, 70s Zenith, just anything weird, anything cool from the 70s. And I love the case shapes of them. You know, the Constellation is a good example. I had an Omega Genève as well, DeVille Genève. Then I just had an Omega DeVille, which is a square watch. And I just loved how wild these watches were. They were just so different. They were so unique. And that's sort of where I got the inspiration to be like, okay, the Nautilus survived, the Royal Oak survived, fine. Well, what about all those watches? I thought they were incredible. At the time I owned a 1969 Zenith Defy, and I loved wearing that watch. And I was like, you know what? It would be really cool if this came back.
And it did.
I guess so, yeah.
And it did. Yeah, they couldn't hold it back for long. It finally came back in the vintage reissue version.
And before they did that, there was me sitting there, like, you know, I was like, I really like this watch. What if I could make something that, you know, reminded me of it, but it was new? I brought the design into the 21st century. People always ask, they're like, "Oh, your watch looks like the Royal Oak," and I'm like, that always annoys me. I'm like, it is not. It's far from a Royal Oak. I get you have a geometric bezel and all that. You know, there are similar things, but it's more of the era than it is of a specific timepiece of that era.
Correct. That, I mean, yeah, that's that is not a great association. It's just that's a little bit of a stretch for sure. I mean, your designs are. I mean, it's like, yes, you have an integrated bracelet, and
and then what else, right? Like,
exactly.
The bezel, like, I can name you 9 other watches that have the same thing, you know. And a lot of people who know me ask that, especially because I do have a Royal Oak. They're like, "Oh, did you just, you know, like look at them side by side and tell me they're the same watch." Like, you know.
Yeah, it's not anywhere close to the same for sure.
Now, along those lines, have you ever felt like you had to tweak or modify something, a design or a specification to fit, I guess, the market of what people usually look for? I mean, I rag on a lot of people all the time. I need 200-meter water resistance. I need
Yeah,
anti-magnetism. Like, is there anything you feel like you had to cave on in that regard?
man, that's an incredible question, and I think a big part of that is I a big bit of backstory. I have really tiny wrists. I have like a 6.5 inch, like I have like a chicken wrist. So I like to make watches that wear a bit smaller. But you get a lot of backlash on that. People are like, I want a watch that wears like big. I want a 42 millimeter. I want, so on and so forth. So that was a struggle for me because I wanted to make, for example, with the Sport Classic, I wanted to make something that would fit my wrist, but would also fit people with normally sized wrists. So I had to work a lot to get the size right. Like with their upcoming Chronosport, it has the numbers you want. It has a 41 millimeter case for the people with a bigger wrist, but the lug to lug is smaller to
Yeah.
accommodate people with wrists like mine.
Okay.
So, I feel like, I would love to make a 38 millimeter watch or even a 36 millimeter watch, but I just can't. I'd love to do it, but at the end of the day, I can't make something. I can't spend a 5-digit amount on tooling. I can't spend all this money making a watch if nobody's going to buy it.
Yep.
It is a passion of mine, but I'm not trying to throw money away at the end of the day.
Right. Right.
So there are things I have to change. And I listen a lot. I try to, a lot of micro brands, what they do is they crowdfund their designs. I
Yeah.
don't do that. I make everything myself, but I listen to people's feedback. People will say, I'll have a review and somebody will say the crown is too small. But I'll think about it. I'll be like, yeah, maybe it is too small. And then I'll change it. But that brings back to me to the logistical side of it, where there's some things that you just can't change. Like when you tool a case, that's it. If you want to
Yeah.
change something, you have to pay the tooling fee again.
Yeah.
And actually, that's what I'm doing with my upcoming watch, the Chronosport. I'm paying the tooling again because I wanted a brushed case side, and the manufacturer gave me a sandblasted side on the case. And they were just like, oh, well, if you wanted it brushed, you have to make the crown guards a separate piece from the case. And I was like, you could have told me this 5 months ago, but you chose to tell me now. At that point, I just have to eat it, because I
Yeah.
want that. I want that, so I'm going to have to change it. And I already know, before I even ask people, I know people want a brushed side on the case.
Yeah.
And I did have the watch out for review, and I turned out I was right. People did want that. So that's not just people. That's also, this time I'm in agreement with the people. So I'm just going to take
Yeah.
the hit on that, and I just have to send them the wire tomorrow.
But that's integrity, man. I mean, it's like sometimes like you get to that point where you have the crossroads and you could have basically said, you know what, creatively this isn't what I want to do, but we've already built it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to eat that cost. Let's go to production. Like it is what it is. And it's refreshing to hear brands that like yourself who are really focused on delivering the right product to the end consumer. Because at the end of the day, it would be very easy to say, you know what, hey, screw it, like let's go. We've
Yeah.
already built it. I've already made the investment. Like let's just go to production. Nobody's going to notice it anyway. And
Right.
there's a lot of integrity there because at the end of the day, nobody would know that wasn't your creative choice. It would just be what the manufacturer ended up doing. So I have a lot of respect for that,
And
for sure. That's integrity for sure.
I appreciate that. And sometimes, you hear news that you don't want to hear as a brand owner,
Yeah.
like our Sport Classic lineup. We delayed delivery because our Kickstarter campaign was June, July 2019. And our delivery was going to be 6 months after that. 6 months after that was December 2020, which was the beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
And our manufacturer messed some stuff up, and I had to make some changes to the watch. For example, Berdinky, he has the cobalt version.
Yes,
Originally,
sir.
it was supposed to have a silver movement in it, but I had to put a gold movement in it because there was just no inventory for silver movements. And I came to a crossroads where I was like, all right, my manufacturer was like, you can wait until we eventually get silver movements, or you can send them now with a gold movement. So I reached out to all my people, all the people who backed it on Kickstarter, and I was like, look, I'm making the decision here. You're only going to see it on the case back, and I hate to do this, but I'm going to give you the gold movement because otherwise you'll have to wait another 6 months. And at the end of the day, most people were cool with it because I communicated with them, and I was like, "Look,
Yeah.
I don't even want to do this."
Yeah, but it's out of your hands, and at least you're transparent with that message. People
right,
will respect that for sure.
And I think that's the big thing. You just got to be straightforward. You just got to be honest, especially on the Kickstarter front. A lot of people have had bad experiences on Kickstarter. It's just a fact. I've met as many people as I've met that have had great experiences on Kickstarter have had bad experience on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So you have to build like the trust for that. And I honestly think I could have done better, last time I did it, and I aim to do even better this time because I always like to put myself in the shoes of it, where I'm like, if I was here waiting for a watch, I don't want to go weeks without communication.
Yeah.
The sad part is sometimes you can't help it. You're waiting on something, your manufacturer doesn't respond. I can't just go on Kickstarter and be like, yeah, I'm still waiting for the response, so there's some not so pleasant parts about it, but I think it's just important to be straightforward and clear with people. And that's really like how you succeed. I mean, you can't just lie to people and not give them what they paid for. At the end of the day, it's their money you're making watches with, it's not your own. So
it's very true. It's right. It is not your money. It is somebody else's money.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So with regards to kind of expanding your brand's presence and marketing and things like that, have you had any specific challenges, or how has it been in terms of communication of getting Le Sablier out there to the masses?
Oh yeah, that's a tricky subject. I'll be honest with you in terms of I could do a lot better on my marketing, and I'm currently still trying to figure that out, how to get myself out there. And I think that's an ongoing process. Some brands are incredible at it. Some brands are just born with a marketing spirit. Yeah. Just like the 7-figure brand I mentioned last year that took off, they came in with expert marketing. I personally, I don't have a marketing background. I don't know the first thing about social media marketing or watch marketing. So I've tried to get in there, and a lot of challenges are, I think, getting your watch in front of the right people. Because I can go on Instagram, and I can run an ad for people who like watches, right? But a lot of those people like Rolex. A lot of those people like Patek Philippe. A lot of those people and they're not into microbrand watches. You have to specifically target people who like microbrand watches. The truth is that a lot of people out there aren't really watch people. They just want a nice looking watch that has a nice brand name. So I think it's important that you have to find the specific crowd that you want. And, I'm always happy to sell my watches to anybody. I want anybody to get into it. But I know the people that would appreciate it the most are people who are specifically into microbrand watches.
Yeah.
So, the channels there are, a big one is Facebook. There are many Facebook groups that are dedicated to microbrand watches, 20,000 members, 15,000 members, so on and so forth. And that's just all people who are only interested in microbrand watches. The other thing is review magazines and blogs, and that's the big thing. There are some people that are great to work with on the review magazine front. There's some, and then there's also times where you have to do sponsored posts. Yeah, which I'm not a fan of. But I think as like put yourself in the brand owner's shoe, right? Like if you're a brand that just showed up and nobody has your watches yet, you kind of need a trusting person, a person that everyone trusts to share about it, and so you do have to do sponsored posts at the beginning, and it's sort of like a necessary vice, because obviously you're paying them, they're going to say something nice about your watch. But the thing that a lot of people don't know is that they're not obligated to be like, they still, overall generally they have to be kind to you, but they still have their own thoughts about it.
For sure.
They're not gonna just praise you without any reasoning. But what I really like personally is there's some great reviewers out there where you tell them, I'm going to send you a watch on loan, you're going to review it, tell me your honest thoughts. Because personally, again, I put myself in the buyer's shoe. If I read a review about a watch, right, and it's like, this is the best watch ever, there's nothing compared to it, I'm not that inclined to believe the review. You know what I mean? So if somebody has something negative to say about my watch, I'm like, write it. You know, like I didn't build a perfect watch for every single human being on 7 billion people on this planet. You know, there's things that you're going to disagree with. There's things that I agree with that you won't agree with. There's things that, you know, Broad might like that you don't like. You know, there's things that you might like that he doesn't like, you know, so write it, you know. That's why I really like doing reviews with people who, you know, they don't ask for payment. They'll loan your watch. They'll tell you their honest thoughts and send it back. Yeah, it sucks. If they say something bad about your watch, it's not great. But at the same time, the way I view it is you at least know the integrity of the person writing it. And whoever reads it, they can tell that, you know, this isn't a sponsored review. This isn't a paid review. The issue now comes, though, a lot of these review magazines, some of them won't even call you back. You'll email them. You know, they're busy with bigger brands. They're busy with things, and you deal with a lot of rejection in that. That
makes sense. Yeah, for sure. And again, that's something that I probably have never thought of, but it certainly does make a lot of sense.
I've reached out to some magazines and they said absolutely we'll review your watch. Some big magazines. I've reached out to others that'll say we'll review your watch at X price. And then I've reached others that are like, we don't want anything to do with your watch. F off. You know, like, you know, so it takes thick skin a little bit, but you know, it's something you got to do because, you know, again, in your shoes, would you buy something you hadn't read any reviews of? And then the other thing is just Instagram. You know, you have to just make sure people see your watch, make sure people like it. One thing that, you know, if any other brand owners are listening, they can empathize with me on this, where you get 100 messages a day from people with 12 Instagram followers that are like, let me have a free watch and I'll show you.
I see that on even the big brand stuff. It's just like, I'll happy to take a watch. And it's like, and it's always like a little fire emoji.
And sometimes, you know, honestly, I'm not going to lie to you. If I feel like someone's influential and they could actually benefit my brand, I'll do it. You know, I God, if I, you know,
for the record, I paid for mine.
Yeah, you did. There's no sponsored going on there, but you know, like
as it should be.
Yeah, but like, I don't know if one day like, Eric Wind or someone called me up and is like, I want to watch, like, I'll be like, okay, like, you know, maybe
we can do say no.
Right, you know, but I get, you know, all brand owners, we get 100 messages a day from people saying that, could I share my watch to your followers, and we don't, like, you know, just give me a free watch. If you're one of those people who do that and you're hearing me right now, please don't do that. We don't want any more of those messages. Like,
here's the PSA. This is the PSA point. Just public announcement.
Yeah.
This is Lugs and Jugs telling you she won't date you.
Yes. Okay, that's a different story. You know, if she wanted to watch, you know, I'll leave it at that. But my thing is, you know, to take it back, like we're small businesses at the end of the day. Like I can't just afford to do that. You know, I would love to be able to give watches to everybody. I'd love to be your horological Santa Claus, but I just can't afford to do it, you know?
It's a business, pure and simple. So, I mean, again, it's like, this is kind of why, you know, when Bro kind of threw this up there, I was like, this, I think sounds like a great idea, because this is a side of micro brands that I think a lot of people just don't know. Mm-hmm. And people just assume that like you can sprinkle fairy dust and have some money and all of a sudden, poof, you have a watch that's going to be first to market and be breaking Instagram. So I love it. I think that the story is fantastic, and it's obviously indicative of your passion for not only horology but the passion for putting out a good product. And I think that for many people is lost again with the kind of the corporate machine and everything like that. This is a human element. Like this is your hobby project, and even despite the cost of your timepieces, you still have integrity for what you want to produce and what you want to get to the end consumer. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. So I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised, and Bro can probably attest to this, if you start seeing a few more orders coming your way after this podcast airs. So
no complaints about that. I think a big part of it, is like, I know this sounds cheesy and you've all heard it a million times from your middle school coach or whatever. Like, do what you love. Because like if I started like, I don't know, a backpack company, I don't know the first thing about backpacks. You know, when you know, a backpack arrives, I'm gonna be like, it's good, like ship it out to the customer. But I love watches. You know, I live and breathe these things. So if I get a watch from the manufacturer and I'm like, okay, this is off, like I'm gonna take that personally. You know, I'm gonna send it back because this is something I care about. This is something that, you know, I really love to do. This is something that I'm really passionate about, and I have been since I was like 8. You know, since I had my first baby G at like 8 years old.
Baby G, I love it.
You know, I think that's a point. Like, you know, if you don't have the real passion behind it, like, you know, I just don't think you'll be able to do make a good micro brand if you don't have your spirit, your passion. I know it sounds kind of like trite and cheesy, but it is true. Like, that's why the brands that I mentioned that I personally like, aside from my own brand, you see the creator in them. You see like what they wanted to make. You know, whereas there's a million others that just look like copy paste of other watches. Another brand I really like is Traska. Traska does great watches.
Oh yeah.
You know, and that's the thing about it. Like, you know, okay, there's a million dive watches on the market, right? But you could see what makes their watch their watch.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of the reasons
they had the mint green before anybody else did.
Yeah, they did. They did.
That's actually my favorite color, like that baby blue, light green.
It's sick.
My AD won't call me back about my OP36, but you know, before all that,
yours won't call you back either.
Nope. And I have purchase history, but
I was gonna say you bought some stuff too.
Yeah. But my point is, before all that hype, I really like that color. You know, that's my favorite color. And that's one of the reasons I like Traska, because they just did what they wanted to do and they made it. And that's what I try to do. You know, I don't have a Tiffany color yet, but you know, it'll come soon. I did do your green dial, you know, that you hear about. And you guys were talking about Omega earlier. So my upcoming Chrono Sport, there is a green dial version of that.
I saw that. It's Arabic numbers, isn't it?
That it is. Yeah. And the story about that, I'll keep it short, but the funny story behind the Arabic numerals is I really wanted a watch that had Arabic numerals, and I went on to, you know, Watch Recon, eBay, Amazon, everything, and I was like, what can I buy for less than $1,000 that has Arabic numerals? And there are 2 Seikos. And
I was gonna say there's Seikos,
yeah, there's 2
Seiko 5s.
2 Seiko 5s, and there's 1 or 2 other micro brands. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna make one. And a part of the reason is, you know, the Middle East has such a storied history with watches and watchmaking that I sort of wanted to make a tribute to that. You know, the watch industry wouldn't be where it is now if the Middle East didn't exist. You know, the amount that they put into watchmaking. So that was a part of the you know, inspiration behind that, and the green dial too. You know, not aside from green being hot right now, I like green. It's a great color.
Yeah, it's a pretty color. I've been seriously contemplating getting myself a green dial as well, and I just don't know what it's going to be. Maybe it'll be a new
for St. Patty's Day.
Maybe it'll be a new Seamaster. Who knows?
Yeah. And I do agree with you, by the way. That color is very different from the Hulk. It's not anywhere near the same color. And getting the green right is hard. I went through, I think, 7 iterations of my dial before I was happy on the green color. So green is a pain in the ass to work with.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And again, these are all just the things that you just don't think about as an end consumer. You're just like, oh, but the date's at 4:30. I wish they would have extended the hour marker a little bit longer so it didn't cut the date off. And it's just like, dude, you know how many prototypes I went to get to this design? I had to make a concession. And this is the one thing I hope nobody would care about. And here you are on Houdiki roasting me.
You say that.
Yeah, for sure. Bro, is there anything else you want to ask our esteemed guest?
I would just ask if there's any, I guess, advice for people who want to dip their toe into the pool. I mean, I get a lot of people sending me mock-ups and stuff, and I don't know how serious they are, but they're always like, oh, take a look at my prototype or whatever. You know, is there any advice you would offer to those people, maybe to either smooth their transition or make sure they don't fall flat on their face?
Man, I love that. Honestly, people come to me and they're like, why do you want, like, why, you know, people have reached out to me and asked for advice in starting a micro brand. And I'm like, look, like, I'm not your Traska level micro brand. I'm not your Brew level micro brand. I don't have that big of a following, but I love that more brands exist. And I try to help people start brands because, you know, I'm not worried about the competition. I think that every brand makes their own product. And like somebody looking at my watch, is not necessarily looking at like another micro brand. They want my watch for my design, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think a piece of advice I would have to impart is there's a million micro brands out there. Make something different, make something that's you, and make something that'll stand out from the other micro brands. Because, you know, I can't even begin to name the amount of the divers there are that look similar, or the amount of, you know, regular watches. I think like if you put your passion into it, if you do a unique design, if you do something that you like and that you're happy with, chances are there's 7 billion people in the world, right? You're not going to be the only person to like it, right? Like, so I think the other thing is build around the movement. You know, a lot of people will come and be like, yeah, I want a monopusher column wheel chronograph. And I'm like, yeah, and I want a Lamborghini for Christmas. Like, you know, it's like,
sir, you can go buy a Habring. You know, like go on with that.
You know, the core of every micro brand watch, because we can't make our own movements unless you're building a $10, $15, $20,000 watch. Find a movement you like with a good layout, and then build from there. Like, do you want to watch with a power reserve? Do you want to watch with a day-night indicator? Do you want to watch with a chronograph? Like, find the movement, figure out how much that movement costs too, because you know, that's a big thing. I mean, some movements cost 30 cents a movement when you're looking quartz, and some movements cost 450 a unit. So you know, you gotta start there, and then build around it. And I honestly think, just, you know, if you have an idea, send it out to a manufacturer, get a quote on it, and see if it's feasible or not. You know, do the numbers. You know, there's some watches where you're just gonna be like, okay, like, never mind. And honestly, you know, if you don't go for it, the manufacturer's not gonna beat you up. You know, and don't be scared to do it. They're not gonna send goons after you or anything if you decide not to proceed. I have a dive watch model that I've never shown publicly, that I went through the whole process. I paid the tooling for it. I made the prototype. I have 6 of them, sitting right there to the left of me. And I never made the watch, you know. I went through the whole design process. I sunk that cost into it. And in the end, I was just like, you know what? I don't think, you know, I just don't think this is right now for this time of the market. So, you know, feel free to make mistakes. Everyone does. You know, it's just, I think, just don't be afraid and make something different, make something interesting. And the last piece of advice I would say, follow the microbrand groups on Facebook. That's the biggest thing, because these are people that only like microbrands. You know, these are people that you can sort of get your finger on the pulse and figure out what people like these days. I'm all for making your own design, but you have to make something that somebody wants. You know, like you can't make you know, $50,000 tourbillon watch, you know, if nobody's going to buy it, right? You might want to make a $50,000 tourbillon watch. I mean, I think it's pretty cool, but, you know, at the end of the day, you're going to be out a lot of money if you just decide to make a bunch of those. So sort of figure out what people like, what's hot on the market, what, you know, and then do your own expression of it. That's a big thing. You have a lot of homage watches in the microbrand world. You have a lot of homage watches in the non-microbrand world too.
In general, yeah, for sure.
In general. So, you know, some people are into that. I'm not really into it personally, but, you know, just figure out what you want, get in your lane, and make it.
I love it.
I think that's great advice. And I think people are really going to appreciate the transparency. I think opacity is something that plagues this whole industry in general.
Yes.
Right.
So I think that people are going to really appreciate that whole level of transparency and honesty that you kind of laid out here tonight.
Well, the way I see it is, you could spend $10,000 and buy a sub at retail if you got a sub at retail. You could spend $10,000 to buy a sub at retail. That's the big if,
yeah.
Or you could start your own watch brand. You know, like it all depends. It's not as expensive. Like with things like Kickstarter out there, you don't need to just have like, you know, $150,000 sitting around. Yeah. Like you gotta have what you're ready to put into R&D and try something. If it fails, it's not the end of the world, you know. I'm saying, okay, obviously if it's the only $10,000 you have to your name, maybe then don't do it. But if you have that money to spend, like, then go for it. I mean, yeah, you might fail, but you might not. You might be able to get something out there, and that's sort of the whole thing. Have fun with it.
Yeah, I love it.
And people can find you, I know, on Instagram at lesablier.watches.
Yep.
And you got a website?
Yeah, it's just lesablierwatches.com.
Awesome.
We got a mailing list there for upcoming watch, the Chronosport. Like I said, it's going to come out probably on Kickstarter end of May, early June. We're going to launch that at $265, $310 for the aventurine version.
Nice.
That's actually one more piece of advice. Be aggressive with your pricing.
Yeah.
When you're starting out as a new brand, it sucks because
You got to get out there.
Yeah, I'm barely making any money on this, but you get the brand out there, you get the name out there. That's what's important.
I love it. I love every bit of it.
Ladies and gents, Akbar Sattar, proprietor of Les Sablier Watches. Thanks so much for hanging out with us tonight. I think it's been great. I don't know where the time went. I just looked at the clock.
Yeah.
But I think people are really going to enjoy this one. I think when they see, a lot of times they'll see a brand or an interview or something come up in like the subtitle of the episode, people kind of roll their eyes and they're like, here comes the sales pitch, or this is going to be just ho hum, let's go through your models, But I think this will be kind of a fresh take for people, which is, I guess, something we like to do on this show.
Absolutely.
But yeah, thanks for joining us. It's been great. And hopefully when you come up to New York, I'll be free and we can link up.
Sounds good. And thank you guys so much for having me on. There's nothing better I like to do than talk about watches. So, this was just as fun for me.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
All right. On that note, 22 in the books, ladies and gents.
Take care, guys.